Hello class, this is our fourth lesson in context. It is Modern Challenges, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. So our information core, to review, our content is birth and infancy. Our cultural group is Native Americans. What we made were Dreamcatchers, the time period 1850 to 1900, where the Northwest Plains states, why spiritual protection for the dreamer, especially young children, and how it's a weaving and netting process. The relevance of our project to this topic is that the Dreamcatcher's purpose, as you know, is to protect the dreamer from bad spirits when they are dreaming. And during the time of the relocation to reservations and the ghost dance, it became a symbol of unity for the tribes and was outlawed by the U.S. government until 1978. Now, in the form of the Dreamcatcher Foundation, it is bringing awareness to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is MMIW. You will see that abbreviation a lot. So, just so you know, today we're going to be talking about some kind of harsh things like missing people and murder and some cases. The Dreamcatcher Foundation was founded by two athletes, professional athletes, NFL player Eli Anku and pro cyclist Shauna Powlis. You can see their pictures over here on the right. They, in cooperation with other professional athletes, fund and organize programs with three main divisions. Their first program is raising awareness of the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. The second program is the GOAT, which is the Global Offensive Against Trafficking, dealing with human trafficking. And three are programs for Native youth, which are educational and sports programs that take place on the reservations and in Native communities. And he no longer plays for the Browns, he now plays for the Dallas Cowboys. They're both young people, they're in their 20s, and they are donating a large part of the money that they make goes into this foundation. So the issue, violence against Native American women often goes unreported and unpunished, and the statistics that we have are based on what is reported. So overall, if you're a Native American woman, you are 10 times as likely to be murdered than anybody else. 4 out of 5 Native American women will experience some sort of assault during their lifetime. And murder is the third leading cause of death of Native American women. Looking at some statistics over here on the right, there are 5,712 reported incidents of missing and murdered women as of 2016. Since then, the count has gone up, and the exact number is not known because of records in COVID and the lack of reporting and certain political policies. So of those 5,712 cases, only 116 cases were ever logged into the Department of Justice system. And then between 2005 and 2009, 67% of U.S. attorneys declined to prosecute anything to do with Native community, Native women matters involving some sort of sexual abuse or rape. And then 96% of the sexual-based violence against Native American women are committed by non-Natives. And that's important because it affects how things are investigated and how people are prosecuted. So crime and punishment, because of the laws governing reservations, which are tricky, a non-Native cannot usually be tried for a crime by a tribal council. So if you don't belong to the reservation and you're on the reservation and you commit a crime, The reservation is a sovereign state with the tribal council, but you are not a citizen. So it's the same as being in a different country. There's all sorts of red tape. And they cannot be tried by the state government because the crime was on the reservation and not in the state that it happened. So, likewise, if you are a Native American and you're a victim of a crime off the reservation, a lot of times it's not reported or reported incorrectly because they're not considered to be the problem of local authorities. And while there's current legislation to change these laws, it's not all through yet, and it's something that is ongoing. One of the important parts of legislation is Operation Lady Justice, which is a presidential task force on missing and murdered American Indians and Alaskan Natives. And when you do the Who's Who's project, in the fourth content lesson, some of the people that are currently seated in Congress that are Native Americans are a part of this task force. However, this sort of thing is nothing new. And a lot of times when we study history, you learn certain things, but they leave out the context of it. They just tell you what is romantic to know. So we're going to look at a historical profile. Most of you know this person, and one of the things to think about is since colonization, Native American women have been seen as disposable by non-natives. They were massacred during the wars. They were used as slaves. They were just treated really poorly. One of the Native American women that you probably should know from history class is Sacagawea, who was one of the guides for Lewis and Clark. And when you read about her in history class, they talk about how she helped them with interpretation and guiding them on their many thousand miles of a journey through the American wilderness. But they leave out the parts of her story that were her life and why she actually did this. So when she was a young woman, a teenager, preteen, she was kidnapped, and then she was sold when she was 13 years old to a Canadian trapper who already owned several Native American women that he referred to as his wives, but they weren't legally his wives. He had just purchased them. And Lewis and Clark, because she was fluent in several languages, she was very smart, they decided to take her along as a guide and an interpreter when she was 16 years old. So she had been with this trapper for 3 years by then. She was pregnant with her first child. They changed her name and called her Janie. And after the expedition was over, the trapper gave her son, who she gave birth to while they were traveling, gave her son to Clark of Lewis and Clark to raise. And Clark took the child, who turned out, really well, but he took the child, gave him an English name, and placed him in a boarding school. So then she had a daughter, but the daughter died as an infant. As you saw in the birth and infancy section, a lot of natives' children died from disease, and the daughter was one of them. And then Sacagawea herself passed away from disease at age 25. So she did not live very long. So imagine yourself, because you are the ages that she was. Think back to when you were 13. Imagine being kidnapped and sold to an old guy for a wife. And then imagine that you're 16 and you're pregnant, and all of a sudden they're saying, okay, well, your job now, and you don't have a choice about it, your job is to lead these group of strangers, all men, across the country. And in the process, you're going to give birth and then take care of your newborn while traveling across the wilderness. That's pretty astonishing on her part, and it's also pretty sad that, she was treated in the manner she was. Okay, so a modern profile. This is somebody that was a high school senior. Her name is Kesara Stops Pretty Places, and she played basketball and soccer. She ran cross country. She was involved in theater. When this happened, she had just had her birthday. It was the very beginning of her senior year of school. Her birthday was over, and she was going to visit her grandmother, who lived in town off the reservation, and help her grandmother with shopping and things, and then she never came home. She went missing on August 24th of 2019, so just a couple years ago. But when her parents contacted police, they refused to file a missing persons report until August 27th, 3 days later, saying that she was probably out partying. And then they found her body on August 29th behind a house. There were no drugs or alcohol in her system, and before they could do a further autopsy to determine the exact cause of death, the funeral home cremated her body against her family's wishes and against her culture's wishes, because they do not cremate bodies. And so that was not correct. And because she was cremated and there was nothing left to investigate, according to the local authorities, they closed her case without further investigation. And because it was not on the reservation, the tribal authorities could not officially investigate either, and they couldn't have access to any records. Now, one of the things about this that is definitely curious and a theory is just a few days before that, her 15-year-old brother, who had been injured and was in a wheelchair, was beaten by security at a local fair. And she was there, and she filmed it, and then she put it on social media, and it has since been pulled. So does this have anything to do with her suddenly disappearing and being found dead? That's a theory for Web Sleuths. It's just one of many, many cases, and it really shows what happens when you have somebody who is a member of a tribe and lives on a reservation, and she goes missing. And it shows the stereotype that, she's just out partying, they're not taking it seriously. I don't know if you guys pay attention to the news, but every day, pretty much, on our local news stations, they have missing people's cases, usually teenagers that have, for whatever reasons haven't shown up back home. They're luckily usually found in a day or two. There is one that's been missing since January that has not been found yet, and people are very concerned for him. But also adults. Our local news does a really good job of covering pretty equally everybody in the situation. When it comes to Native Americans out there, not so much. And she wasn't far from the reservation. She was only like 10 miles from the reservation. So when you're going through this, you will see images of people with the red hand. You might have noticed that if you watch sporting events on TV. Some professional athletes that are involved with this wear the red hand. And it's worn for a couple of reasons. The color red is used symbolically, and in Native culture, colors have dual meanings, because if you wear them for war paint, they mean one thing, And then if you wear them as face paint, it's a different thing. So red war paint symbolizes violence and strength and blood and energy. And red face paint symbolizes faith, beauty, and happiness. So the red hand symbol across the mouth uses the dual meanings to represent the women that have been silenced by the violence and the strength of those that fight for their justice. So it both is in memory of the beauty of the women and their lives, and then also the violence that they encountered and the strength of the people that remain and are fighting for them and have faith that their cases will be resolved. So awareness and activism. Prior to COVID, the awareness took the form of public events, including marches and dances and vigils and powwows. It was getting more and more attention in the news, and you can see, looking at the image, some of the symbols. The red hands, the red dresses are part of it as well. And just so that you know, this was taken before COVID. That's why the majority of people are not masked. The people in front that have masks, it's cold. Okay, you can see the snow on the ground. Internet resources provide information and resources for the families of the women, and some of their cases were covered by news media and podcasts, but there's still limited coverage, and the majority of the country does not know about this issue, especially if there aren't any native lands or native groups around. It tends to be unknown and ignored. So since COVID and not being able to gather, getting the message out has relied more on print and social media, things like this billboard over here. Virtual gatherings are held online, so these would be gatherings of people that are, talking about the issue and kind of doing a virtual meetup. Posters, billboards, and artwork helps to spread awareness to audiences that may not be reached by the social media or who are non-native, because a lot of the virtual awareness programs and things, again, it's not something that if you don't already know about the issue, and if you're not a native, you are less likely to be interested in or spend your time on. But when you see billboards such as this one, it's pretty powerful. And that's kind of where your assignment comes in. So for your assignment, you are going to create a mini poster that is to raise awareness about MMIW. You will need your Chromebook, and you have a choice. You can use digital materials or traditional art materials to make this. I have some resources on your classroom linked, and we will look at those in a minute. I really want you to listen to the TED Talk. It's by a Native American high school student, and she talks about her experience with the issue and facing prejudice as a Native student. She does talk about suicide, and she talks about recovery. And then I also want you to Google, and if you Google MMIW, posters or whatever, you can get some visual ideas. Your directions, you're creating a mini poster that raises awareness. You can use the common symbols associated with the issue, but don't copy it directly. You can use traditional art supplies. It doesn't have to be in color unless you want to. Or you can create it digitally by using the program of your choice, which would be any digital drawing or photo program, or Google Slides, Pixlr, Adobe Spark, whatever you like. Example made with Google Slides that I did is on the next slide, and I will put up a demo video in Classroom so you can see how to make a poster using Google Slides. So this is the poster that I made. And you can do this in Slides and then save it as an image and print it. So I used a few things here. I used the Dreamcatcher and the red hand, and kind of playing on dreams, stop the nightmare. And then I have my statistics and what needs to be done, what it's about. And then these are some of the hashtags that are used for the cause. When you're doing a poster design, your text is important as well as your images. So make sure that you have both and make sure that they are powerful. So you're going to turn in your image, and I just want to tell you about this experience. This image I took off of my computer this past February. I was attending the virtual conference on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and there were tribal groups all over live streaming that were participating through dance and song and prayer and remembrance fires. This was Valentine's Day, actually. So at this moment, this specific group had just finished one of their prayers. And when Native Americans dance, a lot of time that's part of the prayer. And at this very end of this, a bald eagle flew up and started circling them. And that's seen as a blessing from the Great Spirit that, the Spirit is paying attention to what they care about and their intentions. And the look on her face is just, gorgeous. Just things happening. So the reason why I really want to teach you about this, as well as it being an important issue that everybody should know about, but over 20 years, I've been volunteering for missing persons and unidentified people's organizations. I primarily worked with the Doe Network's Project Eden, which is Everyone Deserves a Name, and that dealt with unidentified remains when they find a deceased person and don't know who it is. And then that project eventually became an official unit of the Department of Justice. So obviously I don't work there anymore, but I still volunteer with them because I'm not a professional forensic artist. I just do volunteer things, and I really do more research than anything else. But if you're interested in this type of thing, if you're interested in art, if you're interested in forensics, true crime, there are lots of careers out there, plus you can volunteer. Other important missing persons organizations to look at the Charlie Project, which is an amazing project that is created and maintained by one person who started it when she was a kid. I mean, literally, she was a teenager, and is one of the most credible and important missing people's databases. NamUs, which is one of the official databases, and locally we have the Q Center for Missing Persons that started here and has spread out across the country and does a lot of amazing work. So again, for your assignment, you are making a poster, a mini poster just the size of a piece of paper to raise awareness. You can use traditional media, digital media. If you use digital, you don't have to print it, just upload the image. Okay?